Something different is happening in Cleveland right now, and for once, it's not a controversy, it's not a front office leak, it's not another round of tanking accusations or social media drama bleeding into the locker room. It's something a lot of Browns fans genuinely haven't felt in a long time. Real, legitimate optimism built on actual on-field evidence. Day 2 of Cleveland Browns training camp just wrapped, and Shedeur Sanders walked off that practice field having answered more questions than he raised. No pads on yet, just quarterbacks and rookies getting early work in. But what happened out there was enough to get the entire football world buzzing again. And today, we're breaking all of it down. The footwork, the weapons, the competition, the mentality, and exactly why this particular moment in time might be the most important stretch of Shedeur Sanders' young career. So let's get into it. Here's the thing about quarterback evaluation that a lot of casual fans skip right past. The flashy stuff, the deep ball, the highlight scramble, the no-look throw. That's what ends up on the timeline. That's what gets clipped and reposted 1,000 times. But the real foundation of a functional NFL quarterback, it's footwork. And not just he moved his feet correctly footwork. We're talking about the kind of technical, repeatable, coachable mechanics that separate a guy who makes a great throw once from a guy who makes the right throw consistently over a 16-game season when real pressure is on. Earlier this offseason, Cleveland's coaching staff did something that doesn't happen often. They came out publicly and specifically called out Shedeur's footwork as a point of emphasis for his development heading into year 2. That's not nothing. When a coaching staff singles out something that specific, that technical in a public-facing offseason comment, they're not just talking to the media, they're putting a marker in the ground. They're saying, this is what we worked on, and when camp comes, you're going to see the results, or you're not. Day 2 of camp came, and the results showed up. Watch the dropbacks from that practice session. Watch how he lines up his body before the throw. Watch the weight transfer, how he's pushing off that back foot with real intention instead of just drifting through his mechanics on autopilot. And then watch the ball come out clean, on time, hitting Denzel Boston exactly where it needed to be. That's not a lucky rep. That's not a guy accidentally stumbling into a clean throw. That's a quarterback who went away in the offseason, put in the work on something specific that his coaches identified as a weakness, and came back to day 2 of training camp ready to show that the work actually happened. And here's why that matters beyond just one clean throw to one rookie receiver. A quarterback's footwork is the engine underneath everything else. When your base is right, your accuracy improves. Your timing with receivers tightens up because you're delivering the ball in rhythm, instead of slightly late because your weight was in the wrong place. Your arm strength translates more efficiently into the throw because the kinetic chain from your lower body all the way through your release is actually working the way it's supposed to. Fix the footwork, and you don't just fix one thing, you improve everything downstream from it. So when the coaching staff called it out as a priority, and then you see Shedeur visibly executing it in live reps on day 2, that is a real, tangible, meaningful development checkpoint getting marked in a positive direction. That deserves to be recognized for exactly what it is. Now let's talk about the media narrative around this quarterback competition, because the conversation has shifted in a way that I think a lot of people haven't fully clocked yet. For a long stretch of the offseason, the dominant take was simple. Deshaun Watson is the starter, Shedeur is the backup, and this whole competition thing is mostly a front office performance to avoid looking like they're just handing a job to a guy on a massive contract. That was the conventional wisdom, and honestly, there were legitimate reasons to believe it. But something changed, and it changed gradually, then all at once, the way those things tend to do. The smarter analysts, not the noise merchants, the ones who actually watch film and think carefully about roster construction, started coming around to a different read on the situation. The argument being made now, and it's a credible one, is that this competition is genuinely open, not a formality, not a PR exercise, actually open. And the reasoning behind that shift starts with one honest acknowledgement. Shedeur Sanders is more talented than his draft position suggests, and the one real shot he got last season came under circumstances that were genuinely stacked against him. Think about what that looked like. One legitimate start, an offensive line that was actively falling apart in real time, no real continuity in the passing game, a supporting cast that wasn't built around getting the most out of a first-year quarterback still learning how to process a full NFL defense. That's not a fair sample size. That's not enough information to write a verdict on anybody. And the analysts who are being honest about this are making exactly that point. Meanwhile, the question marks around Deshaun Watson are real, and they're not going away quietly. 2 separate Achilles surgeries, back-to-back. Nobody's erasing what Watson was before those injuries, a Pro Bowl caliber player who kept Houston in playoff contention for multiple years running, one of the most dynamic dual-threat quarterbacks in the league at his peak. That history is real, but the NFL is an unforgiving league when it comes to what those kinds of injuries do to a player's explosiveness, his pocket mobility, his ability to extend plays the way he used to. The uncertainty around what Cleveland is actually going to get from Watson at this stage of his recovery is genuine, and that uncertainty is exactly what makes this competition something worth paying close attention to. Add in 5 new offensive linemen coming in up front. 5, which is essentially a complete rebuild of the most important unit on the field, and a pass-catching room that's going to look noticeably different than it did last season. And what you have is a situation with enough moving parts and enough legitimate unknowns that anyone telling you they know exactly how it's going to shake out is selling you something. There's a phrase that keeps coming up in the smarter corners of the conversation around Shedeur Sanders right now: perfect timing. And the more you break it down, the more it holds up. The modern NFL has made its demands at the quarterback position very clear over the last decade. Mobility matters. Dynamic playmaking ability in and around the pocket matters. The ability to extend plays, to buy time with your legs, to threaten a defense in multiple dimensions, rather than just sitting in the pocket and going through progressions. That matters more now than it ever has. Look at the quarterbacks winning games at the highest level right now, and you'll see that profile repeated over and over again. Shedeur fits that mold. Not perfectly, nobody does, but he fits it in ways that matter for where the game is going, not where it's been. And the timing argument goes beyond just the physical profile. It's about the organizational moment Cleveland is in right now. Todd Monken walks into this building as the offensive play caller, and this is not a name you can just wave away. Around the league, among the people who pay close attention to how offenses get built and how quarterbacks get developed, Monken has a real reputation. He's not a guy who showed up to manage a system. He's a guy who's shown he can get genuine production out of quarterbacks when the right pieces are in place. If Shedeur can demonstrate early in this camp that he's made a real jump from year 1 to year 2, that he can walk into that huddle and have the other 10 guys look at him and just know he's putting them in the right spot, that's the kind of evidence that a play caller with Monken's credibility takes seriously. New coaching staff means a clean slate. Nobody on that offensive staff is carrying over old evaluations, old biases, old impressions formed during a previous regime under completely different circumstances. Shedeur walks in here with no baggage attached from anyone making decisions. Every rep he takes is new information for the people who actually get to decide. That is an advantage that is easy to underestimate until you think about how much organizational inertia usually shapes these kinds of situations. Year 2 jump, new system, new play caller, new offensive line, better weapons. Perfect timing is not just a feel-good phrase here. It's a real description of the convergence of circumstances sitting in front of Shedeur Sanders right now. Let's talk about what's actually around Shedeur in this passing game, because this piece of the story gets buried under all the quarterback competition coverage, and it genuinely shouldn't be. He is not walking into a bare cupboard, not even close. Jerry Jeudy is there, and we've covered that relationship in depth already on this channel, so we won't go all the way back through it today. But Jeudy is a legitimate NFL receiver who gives any quarterback a reliable option as a route runner. That's not a throwaway piece of the puzzle.
Beyond Jeudy, there's Isaiah Bond, who has shown real flashes of being a dangerous playmaker in space when the ball gets into his hands in favorable situations. And then there are the rookies, Carson Concepcion and Denzel Boston specifically, and what we saw on day 2 was exactly the kind of early chemistry-building moment you want to see from a young quarterback and a young receiver figuring each other out. Boston and Shedeur connecting on that rep wasn't just a clean throw. It was two players starting to build the kind of timing and trust that takes real reps to develop, and they're already putting those reps in the bank from the very first days of camp. At tight end, the options are credible too, and credible pass-catching options at tight end matter enormously for a young quarterback, because that position tends to be where a lot of the high-percentage, chain-moving throws live. Having reliable options there takes pressure off the receiver routes and gives a quarterback a safety valve that experienced NFL defenses can't just take away with a single coverage adjustment. And then there's the running back room, and there's a particular story developing there that deserves its own moment. There's footage circulating right now of one of the running backs doing full-speed hill sprints in late July. Not light conditioning work, not going through the motions because the cameras are on. Legitimate, old-school, grueling hill sprint work when nobody is technically required to be doing anything. The kind of extra effort that draws immediate comparisons to the legendary work ethic stories that get told about the great ones in this league's history. Now, I'm not going to sit here and hand out a guaranteed 1,000-yard rushing season prediction off training camp footage before a single preseason snap has been played. That's not honest analysis. But a running back who's clearly out there putting in that kind of extra work in late July, when there's no game on the line, when showing up at all would technically be enough, that tells you something real about where his head is going into what looks like a contract year for himself. And if this offensive line renovation actually delivers what the front office is hoping for, a strong, consistent ground game changes everything for a young quarterback. It opens play action. It slows down opposing pass rushes before they can pin their ears back on every down. It gives Shedeur easier reads and higher percentage throws instead of forcing him into difficult contested situations on every single drop back, because the defense knows the run isn't a real threat. Here's the honest truth about everything we just talked about. All of it. The footwork improvement, the weapons, the play caller, the perfect timing narrative. All of it runs through one gate, and that gate is the offensive line. Cleveland is bringing in essentially a completely rebuilt starting group up front. 5 new starters, new offensive line coach tasked with turning this collection of individual players into a cohesive, communicating, physical unit in a matter of weeks before real football starts. That is an enormous ask. Offensive lines are famously one of the slowest units in football to develop genuine chemistry, because so much of what they do depends on split-second communication and muscle memory built through shared reps over time. If that group gels, if they can protect whichever quarterback ends up starting, open up consistent running lanes, and give the offense a reliable foundation to build from, this offense has a real shot at taking a significant step forward, regardless of who's ultimately under center. The talent around the line is real enough that a functional offensive line could unlock a genuinely dangerous attack. If that group struggles, though, none of the rest of it matters much. You can't build chemistry with your rookie receiver if you're getting collapsed on before your drop back is even finished. You can't run play action effectively if the defense doesn't respect the run because the line can't create any push. You can't give a young quarterback the kind of positive early experiences that build confidence and rhythm if he's getting hit on every third throw. The offensive line is the single biggest variable in this entire equation, and anyone who tells you otherwise is probably more focused on the drama of the quarterback competition than on the actual football question underneath it. Keep your eye on that unit all camp long. How they look when the pads come on is going to tell you more about where this offense is headed than any single quarterback throw. Now let's talk about something that doesn't always make the highlight packages, but might be the most important part of this whole story. Something Shedeur Sanders said himself recently that I think reveals a lot about where his head is at going into this camp.
He talked about not carrying attachments to outside things that could bring his mood down, about staying in control of his emotional state every single day, about actively studying that discipline within himself on a daily basis rather than just hoping the right mindset shows up automatically. Think about what it actually takes to say that and mean it, given everything this kid has been through publicly in the last year or so. He came out of Colorado as arguably the most talked-about quarterback prospect in his class. Massive hype, massive visibility. Then the draft happened, and round after round went by, and by the time his name was called in the 5th round after all that buildup, the takes were merciless. Analysts who had never called a game in their lives lining up to explain why he was a bust before he'd taken a single professional snap. Accusations about his father's influence, accusations about his attitude, all of it completely public, all of it completely loud, none of it filtered or softened. A lot of young players in that exact situation come into their first training camp with a chip on their shoulder that shows up in the wrong ways. Bitterness in every press conference answer, defensiveness when a reporter brings up the draft slide, visible frustration that bleeds into the way they carry themselves around the building. That chip can be fuel when it's channeled right, but it can also be dead weight when it isn't. What's being described from Shedeur's approach is something different. Locked in, mentally disciplined, focused entirely on what's directly in front of him right now rather than fighting battles that already ended months ago. That's not a typical response from a 20-something dealing with that level of public criticism, and I think it's worth taking seriously as a real indicator of whether this kid has the mental makeup to handle the pressure that comes with being an NFL starter, because that pressure doesn't go away when you win the competition, it just changes shape. And then there's the cultural reality that doesn't show up in any stat line. Despite the 5th-round draft position, despite a rookie season that by raw numbers wasn't anything spectacular given the circumstances around him, Shedeur Sanders remained one of the most talked about, most followed, most commercially significant players in his entire draft class. Jersey sales reportedly among the highest of any rookie in the league last year, regardless of snap count. That kind of cultural gravity is real, and it follows this kid into every room he walks into, every practice field he steps onto, every press conference he sits down for. You can debate what it means for football evaluation all you want, but you cannot pretend it doesn't exist. Let's be real about where we actually are in this process, because the excitement of day 2 can make it easy to get ahead of things in ways that don't serve anybody. The pads aren't on yet. This was quarterbacks and rookies working together before the full veteran roster even reports. Everything we saw, as encouraging as it genuinely was, still needs to translate into live, physical, padded practice reps against a real starting caliber defense before it means what we want it to mean. Clean footwork against air and against a scout team look is the beginning of the answer, not the whole answer. Todd Monken has been clear that he wants both quarterbacks tested in genuinely competitive live situations before any kind of final decision gets made. That means preseason games are going to carry more weight than they typically would in a normal, settled quarterback situation. Both guys are going to get real snaps against real defenses with real stakes attached, and whoever performs better in those moments, whoever shows the ability to process pressure quickly, move through progressions correctly, and put the ball in the right spots when it actually counts, that's the guy who should be walking into Week 1 as QB1. And let's be honest about the division this team is walking into. The AFC North is genuinely brutal. Baltimore with Lamar Jackson operating at MVP level, Pittsburgh rebuilding but never to be taken lightly, Cincinnati still talented enough to be a problem on any given Sunday. This is not a division where you figure things out on the fly during the regular season. You need to be ready when September comes, or you're going to get run over. But here's the thing I keep coming back to when I think about it all honestly. None of those obstacles, none of the uncertainty about the offensive line, none of the question marks about how the full roster comes together once the pads go on, none of that changes what actually happened on that practice field on day 2. A young quarterback who had every reason to show up deflated or distracted came in locked in, worked clean mechanics that his coaches specifically identified as a development point, and started building chemistry with a rookie receiver that had people paying attention. That's not nothing. That's a guy doing exactly what a guy in his position needs to do.
Here's where I land on all of this when I step back and try to see it clearly, without the hype and without the cynicism. This Browns offense has real, legitimate, sneaky upside heading into this season if the pieces come together the way some of these early reports are suggesting. A respected play caller who knows how to get production out of quarterbacks, a retooled offensive line that could be genuinely improved or could be a work in progress, we don't know yet, real weapons at receiver, including a rookie who's already flashing early chemistry with Shedeur in the first days of camp, a running back apparently putting in the kind of extra work behind the scenes that signals serious personal investment in a big year. That's not just optimism cooked up to sell hope to a beaten-down fan base. Those are real building blocks pointing in a real direction. Does it guarantee success? No, nothing in this league comes with guarantees. We've all watched rosters that looked great on paper completely fall apart once real football started, and the injuries and the execution problems and the chemistry issues that you can't see in training camp all showed up at once. The NFL is humbling that way. But it does mean that if Shedeur Sanders is the man running this offense, and he continues showing the clean, confident, technically sound play we saw flashes of on day 2, this offense can genuinely make some noise in a division that a lot of outside voices are already sleeping on Cleveland in. For Shedeur personally, keep stacking days exactly like this one. Keep the footwork clean. Keep building the timing with these new weapons. Keep bringing that locked-in, no outside noise mentality into this building every single day. Because talent is what gets you into the conversation. Consistency is what wins quarterback competitions. And right now, through 2 days of camp, Shedeur Sanders is showing both. For the front office, whatever the cap sheet says about sunk cost on Watson's contract, whatever the outside noise says about tanking theories and draft positioning for next year, let the guy who earns it on the practice field earn the job for real. That's the only ending to this story that leaves the fan base's trust intact, and it's the only ending that puts the best possible version of this offense on the field when Week 1 actually arrives. The camp is just getting started. The pads aren't on, the real tests haven't come yet, but for the first time in a while, Cleveland has a reason to watch every single practice update with genuine anticipation instead of dread. And right now, Shedeur Sanders is exactly why.